Hello, it's Enchantment of Eternity, or Mark from Enchantment of Eternity, here again for another one of these weekend reviews where I just quickly talk about shows that I've been watching. So it's been over a week since I did the last one, so I got like 2 episodes of each show to talk about now. So I'm going to talk about The Watchmen, the latest 2 episodes to air, then Rick and Morty, the latest 2 episodes to air, and then His Dark Materials, the latest 2 episodes to air. But then also going to talk about The Mandalorian, but it's just 1 episode for that, episode 3. But anyway, I want to start with The Watchmen because that's actually what I want to talk about the most. And I don't want this video to be too long, so I'll try to be very quick with the other stuff. But with The Watchmen, particularly episode 5, I'm really disappointed that I didn't get a chance to come in here and talk about episode 5 by itself because that blew me away. It was so amazing. Episode 6 is really good too, but I loved episode 5. To me, it was by far the best of the season. So first of all, I'm going to give a spoiler warning for The Watchmen for these next 2 episodes because I can't talk about these episodes without getting into spoilers. So you'll have to mute or jump ahead if you haven't seen the latest 2 episodes of The Watchmen because I'm going full spoilers here for episode 5 and 6. So let me start with episode 5. Which was all about Looking Glass. And holy shit, this was just such a good episode. You know, it's funny because when I subscribed to HBO mainly so I could watch His Dark Materials, but I was like, well, since I got it, I might as well watch The Watchmen as well because I have it now. And I am enjoying The Watchmen so much more. I'm actually looking for it. In fact, sometimes I might even say it's almost on par with Mr. Robot, which I do weekly reviews for. Like, I'm really enjoying The Watchmen. I didn't expect to because I never read the comic. I wasn't a huge fan of it. Maybe the reason why my introduction was sour to The Watchmen was because the only introduction I got from it was from that Zack Snyder movie, which was not very good. So maybe that's why I was a bit sour to it, and I was just never interested in The Watchmen. But this show is really good, and it helps that it's not just another adaptation of what already came, that it's, adding to it. Like, I think it's pretentious of Lindelof to call it a remix. Just call it a sequel spinoff. That's basically what it is. But regardless, he always has to be all pretentious. But anyway, as much as I love to, shit talk Lindelof, I love his work. I love most of Lost, and of course I love The Leftovers. And this show reminds me a lot more of The Leftovers. It's got that strong feel to it. But anyway, Looking Glass is always an interesting character to me. And I love how we really got into his mindset in this episode. But of course, it started with... it's really interesting, the structure of the show. Because it starts off, 30 years after the graphic novel took place, and they reference things, and sometimes you're a bit lost. But the more the season goes on, the more they delve into the backstory, and the more they tie it into the events of the comic. And I love that. And they start the whole episode with a flashback to the events, to the squid event, as we see through Looking Glass's perspective, when he's a kid trying to convert people in New Jersey, and then the event happens, and it was just so horrid. Like, he's humiliated, he has his clothes stripped from him, and he just runs out, and he finds everyone dead. And then they zoom out to show the squid in New York City knocking shit around. And they go back to the present, where they have an ad that he's, advising on about, hey, come back to New York. It's safe now. It's been 30 years. Don't worry about the squid thing. But it really gets you into his mindset. And also, it tells you more about why he has that reflective surface, because apparently it's like literally a tinfoil hat. And he actually has a hat that has the thing because it's supposed to have like a surface that keeps out interdimensional travel, interdimensional events and shit like that. So of course, it shows how paranoid he is, but really that opening scene really made you understand why he would be that way and the kind of trauma that he suffered and how that sort of dictates everything he does. And it was really interesting setup how what's her phrase, Blake bugged his desk and sort of found out he was up to something with Angela. It was really interesting how at first he wasn't willing to give her up because he was friends with her, but then of course he was told that it was for her own good. Now you get that huge revelation, which I thought played out beautifully, how he met this person at a bar. I didn't suspect anything, and then all of a sudden he tracks her back to the place where they're meeting, and it turns out that they were tricking him, that the 7th Cavalry, I believe they're called, were tricking him, and of course it's all run by that senator guy. And of course, my brother said he called it. He said it was the most obvious thing in the world. I don't know. Maybe to me it was almost too obvious that it would have been more interesting if he wasn't the bad guy. It seems like a cliche, but I think it works. But I still don't quite completely understand what him and he said he was sort of in on it with. I can't. I'm blanking on names, but the sheriff guy who got killed. I don't know if he was the sheriff or whatever, police chief or whatever he was. The dude who got killed. They're sort of in on it together to sort of control things and calm things down so a white knight wouldn't happen again. And I'm still not completely clear on that, and I'm still don't know if you can trust what he says. But it's really interesting because he tells Looking Glass in plain terms that, if because Angela's sort of fucking with our shit and it's going to get us killed, we're going to have no choice but to kill her, so you'll be doing us a favor by getting her arrested instead. It will save her own life. And of course, they had the big revelation where they show him the tape that reveals that the whole squid incident was a hoax done by Ozymandias. And that was just... It was amazing on his character and how it sort of relieved him and how all the fear and paranoid he had the whole time, not really necessary, sort of lifted from that. It was really interesting itself. Anyway, we got Jerome in the chat, says that Tim Blake Nelson is such an underrated actor. Absolutely. He's so good in the show. But anyway, all that stuff was just so good. But then, of course, he gets Angela arrested by getting her to reveal sensitive information on his desk where he knows is bugged. But it's interesting because were the 7th Cavalry lying to him? Because, of course, we see the episode ends with them rushing towards his house with, gun armed and ready to kill him. So the assumption is that they're going to kill him. Now, I really hope that isn't the case, that either it's misdirection or not really sent to kill him, or he gets the better of him. Personally, the best case scenario for me would be that he gets the better of them and ends up killing them. But it does sort of imply that the senator guy was completely lying and just sort of using him. And maybe after he showed him, that tape from the tape from Ozymandias about, to Robert Redford about the hoax, maybe he can't have that sensitive information, so they had to kill him. So it's a bit frustrating that they haven't revealed that they ended on that cliffhanger and they didn't touch on it at all in episode 6. I'm actually a bit, after seeing the preview for episode 7, I'm actually a bit worried they're not going to touch on it in episode 7 either. They better. But yeah, that was a pretty intense cliffhanger to end the episode on. And I'd be hugely disappointed if they kill off this character. Now, after having that such amazing episode, it would be a waste to kill him off now. But anyway, you also got the reveal with Ozymandias and how he actually catapulted himself out in space, and he was you can see Jupiter in the background. Now the theory was that he was on Mars, but when he goes out into space, you find out that he's actually on the moon of Jupiter. Now I'm somewhat familiar with the moons of Jupiter. I was even before I started watching The Expanse, and my guess was that he was on Europa. And it just looked that way because Europa is known for having like an ice cape, and it looked like although a lot of the moons probably would look icy, but that in particular, just the way they portrayed it reminded me of how Europa might look. And turns out, like Damon Lindelof confirmed that it was Europa that he was on. So that's really interesting. Obviously, Dr. Manhattan has to be involved somehow. I mean, we saw that the game warden was just another, what's his face, Phyllis, or whatever his name is, another clone of that dude. So we still don't know if it's really Dr. Manhattan who has him in prison there, because he had made a sign, and from our perspective, all we can see is "Help me, D." So the question is the D Dr. Manhattan? And so that's very interesting. And all these theories about what to deal with him. And also, I didn't realize this because I talked about in the previous episode how they said that he'd been there for 4 years. But apparently, every episode where they have a scene of him, a year has passed in between each episode for him. So the scenes with him are not concurrent with the rest of the story that's going on, which I didn't know. I assumed it was concurrent. I didn't realize that the sort of time is different in his scenes, and they're going, each time is a different year. Now, we see from previews in the next episode that he's on trial, so I don't know if that means they're going to wait a year from when he got it captured to have a trial, so maybe that will break the mold. So when he said 4 years ago, I thought it was 4 years from the present, but it actually could have been a lot longer than that, because actually maybe these scenes are taking place very far in the past. So the theory going that I've heard is that his deal, like the deal he struck, because he talked about how he thought this place was a paradise at first, and then he found it was a prison, so he's trying to leave. But they're saying that maybe the punishment for him trying to leave is that they send him back to Earth, and that the meteor that we saw in episode 4, where, Lady True bought that farm, was him returning to Earth, and then how we saw him. She had this gold statue of him, and the theory is that actually is him encased in gold, because he looked a lot older than the time of his death, because everyone think that he died. And so they thought it was weird, and Lady True said some bullshit about, oh, this is how I would imagine he would look now. So that's obviously bullshit. She obviously knows he's still alive. And so I think that theory makes a lot of sense, that he would be the one encased in gold. Now, my question is, if he hates that place and thinks of it as a prison, where would he expect to go if not Earth? Because he obviously wants to leave. He's trying to catapult and leave, and he has a sign saying, help me or save me or whatever the hell it says. Where else would he expect to go if not Earth? But maybe he wants to go to Earth, but not back to Lady True, because maybe he knows if she has him, that she'll just encase him in gold, and that's kind of a living death or whatever. I don't know. Interesting things to think about. They're still very vague with his whole deal and his whole storyline. So that's kind of interesting. So anyway, I've been talking a long time about this episode, so now let me move over to episode 6, which I enjoyed. It was a bit dull for most of it, but I do love the revelation, because I didn't think this at all. Like, I had no idea. But apparently, what's his face? Will, who was Angela's grandfather, was actually Hooded Justice, which I vaguely was aware of because they've been dropping hints throughout the season, showing this, TV movie they're dramatizing this. So they mentioned it, and I'm sure he was mentioned in the Zack Snyder movie I saw before. But not being that familiar with the comics, I didn't really like. I was kind of aware of this, but it wasn't something I paid total attention to. So I was just vaguely aware of who Hooded Justice was before this episode. But of course, when this episode aired, they started with that TV show and show you the dramatization version. And I knew that I kind of got the feeling that we would get the true story of it. So during the episode, just because of the way the start was framed, I kind of wasn't surprised at the reveal that Will was actually Hooded Justice. It is very interesting. Like, I do love that, by the way. There's been some controversy with fans of the comics not liking this because they feel it's retconning the comic, because the comic had the Hooded Justice as a character, and it was ambiguous, purposely left ambiguous to who Hooded Justice was. And so it was supposed to be a question that was never answered, and yet the show is answering it. And so people feel like it's betraying the spirit of the comic. And plus, there was apparently some like Russian wrestler dude or something, maybe not Russian, someone will correct me who's more familiar with this, but some guy who they implied was the Hooded Justice, and the comic implied this, and the show was even dropping hints that people thought this dude was the Hooded Justice, but apparently totally wrong. And some people feel like it's a betrayal of the comics for that. I don't, but obviously I'm a bit biased because I never read the comics. I'm not a fan of it. I wasn't really into the Watchmen before I watched this show, so that is obviously my bias. So from my perspective, who cares? It's a great show. It works. It really works for the show. It's a great revelation as to who Will is. Now, I was a bit disappointed in this episode that they spent so much time in his, Will's past, that I thought they were going to bridge the gap between the time he first became Hooded Justice up to the present, but there's a huge missing gap there. Now, maybe we'll get that later, because basically it jumped from, him being the Hooded Justice and finding this mind-controlled things that the Cyclops dudes were, using to, make black people kill each other, which was, of course, horrendous, absolutely horrible. And he found that and just killed them all. Such an intense, great scene. And then his wife left him and left with the child who's obviously Angela's father. So, but it jumps straight from that to the first episode where he kills the police chief dude. Which I'm disappointed, because I wanted to bridge the gap. I wanted, where was Will all this time? How did he end up with Lady True? Where was he during the events in 1985? What was his role to play in all this? What was he doing this whole time? So hopefully that's something that will be answered in the future, because it seems like that's something that he might want Angela to know. So I thought he would include it in those nostalgia pills, but maybe he doesn't want her to know that yet for some reason or another. We don't know. But so to me, like, a lot of the episode was a bit slow paced, mainly just because I was wanting that more information. But I'm sure if I watch it again and look at it for what it is, it does do great character setup, and it does really, really explore and really make clear the kind of shitty situation he was in. One thing I'm still unclear of, though, is that I think the superhero thing kind of happened a bit too fast. Like, I understand, like, how he felt like he's being discriminated against and the shit he went through with the police, and how they like threatened to hang him and his own fellow officers, and how there was this underground KKK conspiracy, and how he was all that they made very clear. But I think they kind of sped through the part where he became a superhero and he joined up with the Minutemen. To me, that just I don't know. I didn't really buy his motivation for teaming up. Obviously, he said that, because they can help me take on these guys, but they're not going to help them take on those guys. So I thought it was a bit unclear why he would stay with them and then keep doing it. But anyway, almost 20 minutes through, and I'm still in the Watchmen, so I got to move on to other stuff, which I actually won't talk about for as long. But anyway, I am so looking forward to the next episode of the Watchmen. This is probably my favorite show so far. But anyway, let me get into the next show I want to talk about, which is Rick and Morty. I really love the first episode of season 4. But I think these next 2 episodes weren't as good. Now, and again, I'm going to get into some spoilers for Rick and Morty if you care. So, the second episode had 2 plots, and in fact, they kind of made fun of it. I love how the joke they said about how Rick said that he was going on a solo adventure, but it's not directed by Ron Howard, sort of poking fun at Solo. But anyway, I thought that was a good joke. And so he had his thing, and then Morty and Jerry and everyone had mainly Morty and Jerry really had their thing going. And I didn't really like Rick's storyline, to be honest. Like his whole thing about the toilet, it did seem kind of like, I don't think it was that funny, honestly, and I didn't really care about it. It did seem like they were just giving Rick something to do, have his own solo adventure so they could have. But this other storyline with Morty and Jerry and the whole thing about the alien in the app, that was hilarious. So I love that storyline a lot more. The other one, not so much. I mean, it wasn't terrible. It just wasn't all that good. But the thing with that alien had it tattooed on his forehead, do not help me develop an app. And every time he just goes around to people saying, hey, do you want to help me develop an app? Hey, do you want me to help me develop an app? Like, that's just such a bizarre thing. That's kind of weird, bizarre thing that you would expect from Rick and Morty, and of course Jerry does. I mean, you know he's gonna do it, but it's absolutely hilarious as he does, and it ends up being like a Tinder, but actually sort of mind controls people into like falling in love with other people when they match on the app, and then it happens like it started happening sporadically and like crazy, and they're gonna use it to take over the world. I mean, that's the kind of crazy shit that I love from Rick and Morty. So I loved that part of the episode, but the thing about the toilet in the magical place and that other random dude who was using his toilet, whatever. I mean, it was okay, but whatever. Next episode, I think it's probably my least favorite of the 3 so far, but there's only 3 so far, and I don't think this is a bad episode. It was really convoluted, but before you say anything, yes, I know. That was the point. It was supposed to be convoluted because it's making fun of heist movies for being convoluted. And the fact that aspect of it was really funny is what I really liked. How they like it was so making fun of like Ocean's 11 in particular and its sequels because they mentioned those. But any of these heist movies, they're all very formulaic, and they were just totally trashing the formula and be like, oh, we're putting a team together and we have this person, that person, and then you have, we're going to undermine you, and they go back and say, actually, when you thought we were doing this, you were doing this, and then the opponent will, actually, when I thought you were doing it, and they just took it to such an absurd extreme, and don't get me wrong, that's what Rick and Morty is all about, but it became too much. And I do realize that is the point, that they wanted to trash like the formulaic heist movie thing, but I don't know, by making fun of something that's really convoluted, by being very convoluted, you're still being very convoluted, if you know what I'm saying. Not that I was thinking it was terrible, but it was getting a bit absurd. And I know it's supposed to be absurd, but to me it was too absurd. I don't know, just a little bit. Like, I didn't think it was terrible, but I don't know. I thought they took it too far. But there were a few really funny moments in that. Particularly the one moment where I laughed my ass off is when, like, at the very end, where they had that other robot that Rick was in a feud with and trying to outsmart, and they're trying to outsmart each other, and eventually Rick was saying, actually, I knew this all along. I had this plan, and the robot was saying, no, actually, I knew this all along. And they kept repeating that over and over and over again, and then we saw a title card that says 2 hours later, and I was like, no, I knew this. I did laugh my ass out. They're just sitting there saying that the whole time. So that was very funny. And I do another part of the episode I really loved is when they had that random computer, because they said the heist computer that he programmed by watching the Ocean's 11 movies that he never watched. And with the random robot, he said they programmed it by watching a bunch of David Lynch movies he never watched, which, as a fan of David Lynch, particularly Lost Highway, which is totally random. I thought that was hilarious. But anyway, yeah, so it was good. So don't get me wrong, I didn't not like it, but I wasn't crazy about it. I don't think it was as strong as the first two episodes. But anyway, so let me move on to His Dark Materials. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have that much to say about these two episodes. I will say, I mentioned before, how I wasn't really interested in the Egyptians because I didn't know who the hell they were, what their deal is. And I'm starting to learn more. Of course, I'm a hell of a lot more interested in it after Lyra ended up with them. And yeah, so last week's episode was pretty intense. She ended up with them, and she ended up going north. And of course, the whole thing with those two kids breaking into Mrs. Coulter's house and one of them dying. That was really intense, really well done. So I'm starting to get into the show, but it's still yet to completely grab me the way that Watchmen did anyway. But I'm hoping that eventually it would. And this episode that I just watched tonight, I would say was even more interesting, of course, because I remember from that crappy movie, and you saw it in the previews for this show, as the armored bears. That was the main thing the movie was promoting, and it seemed like the show didn't promote it as much, but you saw in some of the promotional material as the armed bears or the armored bears, and so we actually got to see them, and that one in particular that they hired for the crew, and then you also got to meet the dude who does the musical Hamilton. That's all I know him from. He's playing this crazy Han Solo type guy who has an airship or whatever, an aeronaut, I think they call him. But so he's an interesting character. And the whole thing with her using the golden compass and her realizing it does seem a bit like a MacGuffin machine. Oh, how are we going to do this? Let's ask the plot device MacGuffin machine. But that being said, I think it works. I do find it interesting. And I don't know. I'm still not complete. Those who've read the books probably loving this a lot more because they understand more of what's going on. I'm still a bit lost a little bit as to what exactly is going on. I'm not completely invested in this world yet, but I'm interested enough, as I said, and I'm getting more interested the more I watch. So hopefully I'll get there. So anyway, let me move on to the last thing I want to talk about, which is the Mandalorian. So last week's episode, people were calling the best of the three. I don't know. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm not saying that it is either. I don't know. I don't know if I can actually compare them. I will say that I like the first one and the third one better than the second one, but which one I like out of the first and third, I'm not sure. And it's weird because most people didn't even like the first one that much, but I actually kind of did. Now, this last one, of course, it was really intense. You had a huge action scene, which was really amazing with the Mandalorian going back and fighting off all the other bounty hunters. That was really intense. I will admit that. But my thing about this episode is it was so damn predictable. And it's such a cliche too. Some people are like, "Oh, it's so great that he's gone back from the Baby Yoda," but I don't think it's really that earned. I don't think they really earned it that much, and mainly because we don't really know who this character is. So to me, it comes off as less of a character beat or character direction, more of a cliche. More of a just a standard plot device that we see all the time. That the rough guy who thinks it's all about the money, it's only about the money, while he all of a sudden changes his mind and throws away the money to save someone's life. I mean, we've seen this a billion times before. Now, I'm not saying that it's bad or horrible. I still, as I said, very much enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a great episode, but that did hold it back a little bit for me that they relied so heavily on this cliche. Now, it was earned a little bit, I will say, because they did show how he was feeling guilty of working with these dudes who obviously had connections to the Empire, even though the Empire's gone. They made this clear. These dudes he's working for obviously had connections with them, and the other Mandalorians were not cool with this and giving him shit about it. And so you can kind of understand why he made it. And plus, he did form kind of a bond with the Baby Yoda, but I don't know. It wasn't an extremely huge bond, but it was one. But anyway, Cardinal Doomsday in the chat, hey, how's it going? No, it's all good that you're late. I'll probably be ending soon, but that's all good. Yes, you're watching The Mandalorian, Colonel Doomsday? You're saying it's such fun. But anyway, yeah, it is fun. It is a fun episode. I will grant you that. And so, yeah, as I said, I don't think it was terrible, but I don't think it's easily the best episode of the season so far. I think it's, I don't know what it is. It's a bit hard. I'm not as clear on it as most people are, but it was intense. I do hope it gets better, though. I hope they take it in and explore this character more and explore his connection with the Baby Yoda. I did really like those scenes, though, where he confronted Carl Weathers and how he thought he was trapped. And by the way, I did completely buy that the other Mandalorians came and helped him. Like, I didn't think that was a Deus Ex Machina, because they set up for that perfectly by saying how they were pissed off with him for, making a deal with these Empire types. So it makes total sense that they would help him fight the Empire types. So that was cool. So I did like the episode, did enjoy it, but it was relied a bit too heavily on the cliche for me to say it was the greatest thing ever, or the best thing ever. But it was still a good episode. Anyway, yeah, God, 30 minutes. I think 20 of it I spent talking about the Watchmen. But anyway, that is all I gotta say so far. I mean, I am liking the Watchmen a lot, and if they really land this ending, it will probably be one of my favorite shows of the year, or maybe one of my favorite shows going forward, and I'll have to do full-length reviews for it. But I can't for season 1 because I got way too much shit going on. If you're following my channel, you know I'm actually falling behind because I'm taking such a long time to do this, how I would write Lost video, because I'm literally having to write each episode out, and so I'm falling behind on a lot of my videos, and it's fucking up my schedule. But I'm going to try to get back on track this week, hopefully, and maybe try to get ahead again. But anyway, Colonel Doomsday, yeah, I'm watching The Mandalorian, something that doesn't require too much thought. That is true. Yeah. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll probably be back sometime next week, talk about the next episodes of these shows, so I'll see you guys then. Take care.